Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Eltharion. My original intention with this video was to make an early campaign guide going over the first 20 or so turns. However, I don't think Eltharion needs such a video. He has a really powerful army, elves are in a really good spot, and especially since he's mainly going to be dealing with Savage Orcs at the start, either with the top knots, or if I toggle the Fog of War with Warzag, he is absolutely going to be able to decimate them. The reason he's going to be able to decimate them is he has good spearmen. He gets high rank on his spearmen recruits, so he can get some really good spearmen from very early on, and these spearmen do counteract one of the main effects of the Savage Orcs, one of the main benefits, which is their charge bonus. So they'll be able to hold the line very well. And meanwhile, your archers, your Tier 1 archers from any settlement will be able to do enormous damage to all of those Savage Orcs. So it's pretty easy to play Eltharion from a campaign perspective when it comes to battle. However, there is a discussion to be had about his early game. See, he starts here off the coast of the Badlands, but he also starts with Tor Ivres and an army here under a princess. This army only has 4 units. Beating this initial army it starts with would be a difficult battle unless you recruit more units. Tor Ivres itself has amazing growth due to this particular structure over here. And you also have a cavalry structure as well, though I would recommend, if you're going to keep Tor Ivres, to demolish it. Now, let's talk about Eltharion's campaign goals. Your victory conditions for short campaign victory require you to get Tor Ivres to Aspired Citadel level. If I look at the building browser over here, Aspired Citadel is tier 5. You get a choice at the start of the campaign after you fight your first battle and occupy your first settlement. That's the current trigger. And what will happen then is you'll get a choice. Either you get a lot of money and growth, or you get a lot of influence and a temporary boost, a very short boost to control. I'd strongly recommend taking the money, because you'll want it. And crucially, the growth is also going to be beneficial. There are multiple ways of playing Eltharion's campaign. You could abandon the Badlands plan, just disband this entire army. Yeah, you lose some decent units, but most are tier 3 really. You'd lose some decent units, but disband this army and disband Eltharion himself, and have Caval start making the journey all the way home, so you can use them. That will take quite a few turns, while also recruiting units here to take this element. You'll still get the choice between keeping Tor Ivres or giving it away when you do occupy your first settlement, regardless of which that settlement is. So even when you're talking this, so you can start your campaign with a significant amount of influence benefit. But Eltharion is supposed to, at least theoretically, practically not so much, to be a campaign about fighting in the Badlands. However, there are a few problems to be talked about that. While Eltharion can settle in Elven territory, no problem, and the Wasteland, he won't be able to sell in Desert nor the Mountains. So that means really that his campaign, his ideal campaign territory, is going to be essentially limited to the Badlands territory, which isn't the best territory in the game and will create significant problems. His starting province here is amazing. There's a structure here that will give you 1,000 income and a noble benefit. It would be worth taking that. But beyond that, yeah, there's not necessarily a whole lot. You can make deals with Cetra, maybe Forik, maybe some other dwarves, but having to fight in the mountains would not be an ideal campaign. And this is compounded by the fact that your long-term victory condition requires you to basically take out all of the major Dark Elven factions. I think this is a bullshit victory condition. I mean, Nagrand I could understand, but having to go all the way to Cathay and Lustria and the Northern Wastelands is ridiculous. I think Creative Assembly really needs to swap those around. But your short-term campaign victory condition requires you to have Tor Ivres at level 5. Now, I'm not sure this happens if you give Tor Ivres away. If you give it away, it goes to Tyrion. Does it count whether or not Tyrion gets it? I don't know. I haven't played the campaign that long. It would take many turns to get it to a level 5, even in ideal conditions. And Tyrion has a lot of things on his plate. So, with all of that being said, here's what I would do if I was playing a full-on Eltharion campaign. You could abandon the balance and head back to Ulf-1, but you're gonna have some limited expansion positions there. I mean, Ulf-1 is already crowded, as is. And yeah, sure, you could take southern and northern of Rest, that wouldn't be a problem, but and then Nakari's territory, but then, and you could also take Nagarev, but then you would start encountering issues. Though you could play that, like just take all of the eastern and northern part of Ulf-1, and then start trekking into Dark Elven territory to eventually deal with Malekith. That could be a plan, if you do decide to abandon the balance side of things. But if you do decide to go to the balance, here's what I recommend. The event will pop up when you first occupy our settlement. And if you decide to give Tour of Rest away, what will happen is that this army will also be disbanded, provided it is in Tour of Rest, in the region of Tour of Rest. This is a cheese, sure, but we're gonna abuse it. Unless they start, like, obviously they're gonna make changes. And I really think that some changes need to be made. But I'm gonna fight this battle, and I'm going to occupy it. Okay, and the event popped up. Either 50 growth for 5 turns, that's an enormous amount, and 25,000 income, or 120 influence and 5 control. Go for the growth. Like, honestly, beyond the money, the growth is amazing to get started on the Battlelands campaign. I think he really should have a victory condition to take out some of the factions in the Badlands, not all of the Dark Elven factions. So anyway, the event popped up, and if I go back to Ulf-1, I still have this army. Now this will affect your supply lines, but you can keep this army here in Kafik. They won't like it that you're doing that, because they won't like the trespasses, but you can start doing global recruitment. However, there is a twist to this. You now have a peace agreement that was just made. So if you declare war on them within 10 turns, you're going to end up in the situation where everyone's going to dislike you, and that's going to make factions far more likely to declare war on you and make diplomatic deals hard. But you can keep that army for, like, let's say 7 turns or whatever. Yeah, you will have that penalty of 4%, but it's only 82 income right now. Just deal with that penalty, conquer a lot of territory in the Badlands, and at about 7 turns or so start, no, like let's say, 6 turns. Start doing global recruitment, get a lot of units, be prepared to take Northern Vrest. Or the minor settlement in Northern Vrest that the Orcs do have. By that point, Tyrion may end up being in a war with these guys. Tyrion can move very fast. And you may be able to take this settlement in Northern Vrest, as well as these settlements in Southern Vrest, or at least some of them. And then you can trade Tor of Rest that Tyrion will have for you can get back Tor of Rest from maybe some of the minor settlements here, or even the capital here of Southern Vrest, which you'll want anyway. But I think Eltharion certainly needs different campaign victory conditions. Upgrading Tor of Rest to a high level, that makes sense, but whether or not that would work, if, like, I think maybe that should be changed to you holding the province, or an ally holding the province. I don't know, like, I think some of those victory conditions are in a rough state and need to be changed, but by just preserving this army over here, you will give yourself the opportunity to get some territory, which you can then trade for Tor of Rest. You may end up spending more money than you gained from the event. Now you may ask, well, why not just go for the influence, right? The reason you want to go for the money is for the growth, especially. Forget that you're passing off on a huge sum of cash. Forget that for a second. You're also passing up an enormous amount of growth that will allow you to get this initial province in particular to a very high level. In particular, get the capital to level 3, which will in turn give you an Oath Gold mine, which will generate 1,000 income per turn. That is incredible. And you will want that income as Eltharion. And so I would say the fact that the growth is tied together with the with the money, I mean, there's every incentive in it. But of course, there are downsides. Now, if you don't want to use the cheese, I'm just going to make this point. If you don't want to use this cheese and you want to do it on your own for whatever reason, but it's going to make it much harder, especially if it turns out the victory condition does require you to hold it yourself. I don't know if that is. But if you do decide to not cheese it, I would just recommend disbanding this army, including her. Why is that? Well, if we look at her traits, battle effects, campaign effects, she has no negative ones, right? And she's already a lord you control. So you can disband her from turn 1, and then eventually just recruit her again, I believe, right? And you wouldn't pay money for that, and you would be able to get her. She wouldn't be a great lord. Princesses are not as good as mages, archmages, or the princes themselves, but she would be good to get the lord for no influence cost that doesn't have a negative trait. So these are some of the things to be aware of when starting your campaign as Eltharion, if you do decide to play him. I don't necessarily think he's in a good spot. I do believe he is the best legendary lord on the High Elven side, absolutely. I mean, why is he the best? Because he can get a lot of things from this particular prison, and he can get those special units, the Mistwalker units, which are some of the best, if not the best, High Elven units in the entire game right now. And only he can get them if you're playing him. So Eltharion can get an enormous amount of power if you do decide to play him. And yeah, he has that power. He has a better army roster. Like, he has all the regular roster that everyone else has, but he has a lot, quite a bit more on top of that as well, let alone all the benefits you get from interrogations, income, influence, experience through the Warden's Cage. Anyway, Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I will see you next time. Hope this was useful to all of you.